listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Let's talk. And I am Halli Casser-Jayne. Welcome to my listeners in the United States and around the world. Tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com. Before we begin today's show, I want to share with you some exciting news. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show, already syndicated on so many stations, is now syndicated on all Amazon Alexa devices. Program your device, say the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, then have a listen. How easy is that? Enjoy. Now, this week on Talkish with Halli Casser-Jayne, I get to speak to two truly fascinating people. Up first, renowned journalist and author, here to talk about the new amazing scripted series debuting on National Geographic Channel and based on her own best-selling book, The Long Road Home, Ms. Martha Raddatz. And at the bottom of the hour, from the archives, we return to a conversation with the man the New York Times called President Johnson's deputy president, a true witness to history, having served under Presidents Kennedy, LBJ, and Carter, and author of The Triumph and Tragedy of Lyndon Johnson, The White House Years, Joseph Califano, Jr. There's a lot of ground to cover. Let's get to it. You're listening to Talkish with Halli Casser-Jayne. Who doesn't know Martha Raddatz? As ABC News chief global affairs correspondent, she's been a figure on household TVs for decades. One of America's premier journalists, she's reported from hotspots all over the world, graced us with her presence as co-anchor of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and is the author of The Long Road Home, a story of war and family that made both the New York Times and Washington Post bestseller lists. Now, a scripted series on the National Geographic Channel, offering viewers an intimate window into the experience of war as seen through the eyes and the hearts of the soldiers who fight them and the families back home. The Long Road Home tells the story of April 4th, 2004, when a small platoon of soldiers from the 1st Cavalry Division out of Fort Hood, Texas, was ambushed in the Baghdad suburb of Sadr City, where the inexperienced young soldiers faced an unexpected and unimaginable attack, a day that would come to be known in military annals as Black Sunday. The 8-part series lasts the exact amount of time the soldiers were pinned down and stars, among others, Michael Kelly of House of Cards, Jason Ritter, E.J. Bonilla, Kate Bosworth, and Patrick Schwarzenegger. Journalism, Donald Trump, her personal life, The Long Road Home, Miss Martha Raddatz. Let's talk. Well, hello there. How are you?
Hi, Halli. I'm great. Thanks.
So nice to have you here, Miss Martha. So listen to me. Yesterday, saw 2 episodes of The Long Road. Oh, my gosh. Riveting.
I know it.
Fantastic. Look, kiddo, this is your baby. You brought it to life. I mean, how did it feel to see it come alive on the screen?
I think and by the way, it just gets better and better. I mean, they have done an extraordinary job with this. I'm still, it's surreal, and that's such a cliche word, but it is. And I just focus on how much this means to the families, to the survivors, to the Gold Star families, and quite honestly, the actors and crew. I mean, it is a band of brothers and sisters in the crew and the cast and the real soldiers. You've just never seen such an effect, I think, on a cast. I mean, Michael Kelly and Jason Ritter and Jeremy Sisto and John Beavers, and I mean, they have cared so much about the real people, the real families, shown such respect, learned so much, want people to watch it. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time with Michael Kelly lately. If you know him from House of Cards, he is the most genuine guy and just is so proud of this work. And he tells great stories. I mean, he met the guy he plays because the guy he plays is now a 3-star general, and he's just, Gary Valesky is just a god in the military. Gary. And so Michael walks on set, and a couple of the guys who know Valesky take a look at Michael and give him the, up and down and say, "You're playing Valesky? Good luck, brother."
He's just wonderful in it. They all are wonderful in it, and I think that's one of the things that's so compelling. They're not actors on that screen. They are the people, and you feel it.
And they really are. Yeah,
right.
They really are.
And that's why.
Yeah, I mean, from day one, they were. Yeah. They looked at all the old interviews of the guys. They were calling me, it's like, "Hi, it's Michael Catt. Oh, hi, it's Jeremy's sister. Oh, tell me everything about Robert, or tell me everything about Valesky, or tell me, and then they met them again. But when they first started, a lot of them hadn't met him. And, Michael, with his schedule, his crazy schedule, he didn't think he could do it. And he said, then he Googled Gary Valesky, and interviews with him came up, and he's just, "I have to play this guy. I have to do this." And
the role was
reworked
him.
everything.
Yeah. Absolutely, no question about it. But I have to ask you this, because, look, first of all, you've had one hell of a career. What haven't you seen, right? So now you get this long road. You write this book, The Long Road Home, which was a major bestseller in New York Times and a Washington Post list. You lived, you breathed, you died, you risked life and limb, right? Back to Iraq 20 times. Why this story of everything that you've seen, Martha? Why this one?
I think, Halli, because it was the first one that I could relate to in such a deep way. It was a turning point in the war. We'd all been writing about no weapons of mass destruction. The invasion had been over for more than a year. Things seemed pretty peaceful. We didn't think we were at war anymore. And I hear this battle. I go see these soldiers. I sit them down and hear their stories about it, and it was the first time I'd seen a soldier cry. To hear Robert Miltenberger, this kind of seasoned staff sergeant, but had never seen combat, break down when he starts describing the rescue squads coming out of the city with their trucks filled with blood, and the descriptions and the pain was so deep. And then I just wanted to keep going back and visit them. Today, I'm very close to many of these soldiers and families still. I mean, I've seen their babies grow up. I've seen Gary Valesky's 6-year-old, who's now, about 6 feet tall and off in college, and the Denomy's little boy who was 4 days old when his dad went over there, and is, now a 13-and-a-half-year-old. They're my family too. They are. And I feel like the risks I took for my own family, they understand that I did it for them too, and it meant a lot to me to tell those stories. And I thought, these aren't, Navy SEALs, these aren't special operators, these are regular guys who were riding around in a minivan and then suddenly found themselves in the most intense combat, fighting for their lives, thinking of their families and their poor families back home, or
that's what
getting
makes
the word.
It so brilliant and so humanizing, because you do something that rarely is well done in literature, and that is you take the combatants and you marry that with the family life at home. Because to be a warrior, it's both. It's family and it's the career on the field. And that's what I think. Oh my God, my heart was breaking for those women and that little baby.
I know.
In the church in that first scene. Oh my God. So talk to me about that, because you know what? That's your life. Off you run to war. I don't think most people understand. You're a mama, 2 kids.
I'm a grandmama.
Well, a pretty one and a young one, really. But there you are. So you know both sides of the story in a way, because you left family
I do,
home.
It's interesting you say that, knowing both sides. I often felt during all this too as kind of a bridge between the war zone and the home front. I experienced what they were experiencing over there in the battles and throughout the war. But when I came home, I'm, a wife and a mom too, and I could talk to these wives about what their husbands didn't want to talk about sometimes, didn't want to. And it was very interesting getting close to these families. And I remember Beth Corelli, who's the wife of the commanding general, Peter Corelli, over there, who are really, my husband and I, pretty much our closest friends now over these years. He's now retired. And Beth, when I would come back and I'd go over multiple multiple times, and General Corelli was deployed multiple times. Tell me everything. What's it like? I said, I'm so jealous that you get to see this and experience, so you just have to tell me everything. Just sit down and tell me everything. And I loved that, and she just wanted to know from my perspective, because I could talk to her as a friend and a wife and a mom in a way, and when I'm with the guys or women who've been in battles, there weren't any on the front lines that day, but I could talk to them because I'm a war correspondent and have experienced what they've experienced. But, there's great risk. My colleague Bob Woodruff was so badly injured in 2006, so I lived through that too. We thought we'd lose him. And, today, Bob and his wife Lee have the most incredible foundation, the Bob Woodruff Foundation for Wounded Warriors. I'm on the board. So this is just part of my life. I can't move on from it. I don't want to move on from it. It makes me a better person. It gives me hope from meeting people like this, to see that courage and that resilience, and to know they do it and 99% of the country doesn't.
Right. Well, that's the other part we could have a long conversation about, is how few are, actually get in there and see that kind of thing. And it's interesting also to me, though, that, see, the thing is this, people don't understand, and I think this film wonderfully shows it, and your book did as well, how it is a family affair. It is not the warrior. It's not just the guy who goes off to war. Everybody in that family, from little kids to babies to mama to grandparents, the world is contributing. Their world is contributing to saving us, to helping us.
And those families, I always think that people think, oh, they're military families. They're different. They're trained to do. They're not. They're just like we are. They are just like us. They get up in the morning and they get their kids off to school, and they, have fights with their spouses, or they don't. It's. I remember one wife told me that just before her husband deployed, she was just fighting with him all the time because she just wanted to hate him before he left. She didn't want to love him because it hurt too much. And it just, these human experiences are so deep. And I think it's one of the things about this, because they're not the special operators or Navy SEALs, and it's not, those amazing, it's us. It's us. It could be any of us thrown into that situation, and you can just relate to these guys in ways. And it's also, the characters are so distinct in it, I think. You watched a bit of it, and I'll bet you figured out who was who right away.
Oh,
and I think that's rare in a film about war, because it's, you talk about it, it's like, man, they're all wearing the same thing and they all have helmets on, so you can't really tell. But this one, man, you knew who Eric Berkwin was, right? And you know who Valesky is, and Milton Berger and Dunamy, and they're just very distinct.
Absolutely, no question about it. But you're not like the rest of us. Well, maybe.
I kind of am. I am.
The only woman that I know that flew in an F-15, right, loaded with explosive devices, weighing 500 pounds each. I mean,
right,
come on,
right.
kiddo. You broke some
I was
barriers.
out on the Reagan about 3 or 4. I was out on I had quite a week last week. I was in France with the cast and crew doing some things for Nat Geo there, and then I flew to Hiroshima, Japan, and then flew out to the aircraft carrier Reagan in the Sea of Japan. So that I'm even awake now, that's my biggest challenge.
You can sleep when you're like the great grandmother.
Right.
That's when you go to
exactly,
sleep, because there's no point in doing it before. But seriously, what a career! Oh my God, And
well, thank you.
Well, it's true, and those of us who've dabbled in what you do as war correspondents, as I did when I was younger, and back in the day, darling, not so easy. Right? You had a fight.
Yeah. Oh, no.
You got tales to tell.
Yeah. Yes, you do. And most of them involve restrooms, but or the lack thereof.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, to me, when young women, and it's probably like you're like, oh, I don't want to be that woman who's like, she's the first one to do that, I just want them to look at me. But I realized years ago that young women need a mentor, and it's great for them to see me doing that, and it's great for them to see me do a debate. And that makes me the most nervous. I just want to do well as an example for others, and that they can do it too. And if that's what they choose to do, and not that many people want to do it, but that's where my pride comes from. And I am humble about this because of people like the Valeskis and the Denomys, and they've done a lot more than I ever have.
No, but you're a trailblazer. Not an easy place to be, really, when you think about it. But there you go.
Yeah.
But and there are the two sides. There's the correspondent, and then there's the mom. And what about guilt? Can I ask you about guilt? When you have a career like that, and you're on that trajectory, and and it's falling into place, and you got to. I know the feeling. You got to run with what you got in front of you, because it's there for a reason. So you do.
Yeah.
But you leave the family behind. And there were a lot of people in the early days, probably, and their eyes were rolling like, what the hell is she doing?
Yeah, what is she doing?
Right.
I know.
Talk to me a little bit about that. And I'll tell you in this respect, though, Martha, for young women today who want to do what you do, some things have changed. Some things still haven't changed, I think, but you may have a different perspective. But talk a little bit about that.
Well, I have a daughter and I have a son, and I would say challenges for women are still there. They definitely are. The one thing I would tell young women and young men is you have to have a life. Whatever it is, you have to have balance in your life, whether you want to get married and have kids or whether you just want to go out and have a more fulfilling life someplace else. It cannot be all work. In many ways for me, and my balance is that I was doing something that I felt was so important and that my family appreciated, that it was, in a sense, easier for me to say, I have to do this because it's important work and these stories need to be told. I would take my kids when they were younger up to Walter Reed or the Bethesda Naval Hospital to visit with the wounded, to go to the Bob Woodruff event, to know people, to know our service members, and that helped my kids and husband understand what it was and why I was doing it. There were times that were extremely hard for me to leave, and those are the times that, yes, do you have guilt? Absolutely. There were times when I was very worried if something happened to me, what would happen to my kids and how that would affect them. And I think you have to put that out of your mind and know that they would know why you did it and the importance of what you did.
So you were a woman with a mission.
And I was, yeah. and again, compared to what our troops do and those families, I got to come back home. I could go over there for a couple of weeks and come back home and see my family. If I had a personal, I could come home for Christmas. I could come home for things. I could come home whenever I wanted to. They don't get to do that. Gary Valesky, all of them miss so many Christmases. One of the soldiers, 65 months away. 65 months. Can you imagine that? I mean, he missed every event.
And multiple deployments to boot these days.
And multiple deployments,
which is just cruel. So take me here, because there was something in this film that touched me a great deal, amongst many things that touched me. And I'm assuming it was taken from the book and the perspective that you gave, and that is, we talk about being politically correct today, and we, not like Vietnam, we don't say, blame the warriors who come home from a war. We do all that. We say all that. We say, oh, but it has nothing to do with the troops. They're wonderful. They're our heroes. They're that. But I'm not sure that's 100% true, Martha. And that's touched on in the film a little bit when you see different people taking different perspectives of why they're actually there. Can we talk about that a little bit?
I mean, why they're there. I have to really give props to the Army and the Pentagon for this. And you'll see, as you see more episodes in this, there is a young man who became a very outspoken anti-war protester, and there's an entire episode about him and why he joined and why his, what his family thought and what they didn't think. And it just shows kind of exactly the point you're making, too. There are a whole lot of different reasons people go in. There are a whole lot of reasons people serve. Again, 99% of the country doesn't. And, they can say, thank you for your service. I would join the chorus of saying that's really not enough, that you have to stay involved, that you have to be a voice in your nation about what the cost of war, what it means, that you should be smart about that, and that's what you owe them. And I tell people that I think every day should be Veterans Day. You really should think about it every day.
There's another aspect that comes up in that, and is in the old days, when you and I were coming of age, we knew who the good guys were versus the bad guys. It was very black and white. You wore a black hat, you were a bad guy. In the old Western, you wore a white hat, you were... I'm not so sure. In the film touches in the beginning episodes touch on this just a little bit too about everybody from the Rockies to the.
It's just, yeah. I mean, Miko Alon is the screenwriter. Just did a brilliant job, and he, particularly with the Iraqi interpreter, which I'm not going to give away anything, but he fills out that story, which is. I mean, one of the things that Nat Geo really wanted to do that I couldn't really do in the book because it was just way too dangerous to go into that city all the time. You really couldn't get interviews with the militiamen or, all those people. So we really wanted to tell the story of the Iraqis, and he does that through the family that was in the house and through the Iraqi interpreter, the family in the house where they took refuge, where the soldiers took refuge, and we saw them barged in and go to a roof. And he does a really brilliant job of the nuance of that, and that it's not all just as you said, good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy. He just Miko does a beautiful job with that nuance.
What a face, by the way. Oh my God. What a face.
What a face. Oh, yeah, I know.
Right?
I know.
I mean, oh my God, he sucks you in.
The interpreter?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was crazy about him.
Darius is just a brilliant actor.
He doesn't even have to say a word, right?
No, he's just fantastic. And he's one of those, Darius and John Beavers are lesser known actors. I think this is like breakthrough parts for them. They're just magnificent in it.
Okay, we're gonna digress for a minute. We're gonna talk Donald Trump.
We probably aren't.
Well, let me just put it, because I want people to know. War correspondent is how a lot of people think about you, and of course you're so much more than not just, and that's a bad way to put it, but a war correspondent, because you were on Capitol Hill, you were doing your thing, and that's a part of your world. And if there's anybody who understands it. And Martha, the thing about you is you're the most balanced person. God damn, I was looking for bad stuff on you and I couldn't find it anywhere. It's like, where is this?
Oh, there are a few internet hits going around. I'm sure you can find.
The biggest thing that anybody talked about was you're shedding your tears.
Which was completely
had nothing
fiction.
Exactly, because had
Total
nothing
fiction.
to do. By the way, I went back and watched and watched. It had nothing to do with what they
plus it was not true. I was out till 3 a.m. and I was talking about the troops.
Oh my God! I mean. And that was it. You could see your heart about the troops, and that's what it was about. And that's what's turned. That's what's changed in our world. So when I say I want to talk about Trump politics, I really want to talk about how things are turned on their ears these days. Politics has never been, anything less than blood sport, but not like
You mean
this.
How many times we've said we've never seen anything like it?
Talk to me. Say something. I mean, it's crazy. It must be. What's going on from your?
It's very challenging to cover because it as we said time and time again, it's unlike anything we've covered before, any administration we've covered before, and I strive every day to be balanced, not normalize what is if there's super offensive stuff or if there are lies, I think, or mistruths, then I think we point them out. I think we did that on Sunday with John Kelly about the congresswoman and things he'd said there. But I try very hard every day to be objective because I think that's my job.
So hard in these times to be objective, I have to say. So hard. It gets harder every day, every second of every day. So let me take you out here. A little lighthearted, but maybe not. You can't be perfect. Are you perfect? What's not?
Oh,
tell
not.
Tell the audience the one thing that you really don't want to don't be mad at me for asking, but I want to know.
See, the thing I get mad at myself most is if I crabby. I get upset when I'm impatient and crabby because I don't want to be that way because it's a stressful business. It is, and if you don't get sleep and you're crabby at the office, I just beat up on myself. What else? Gosh.
I'd be hauling off. I'd be giving you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and see how good you.
No. I mean, there's just so many things. I mean, we could just so many things. I just want to get better every day.
Yeah,
no. It's true. I mean, no. It's like everybody. We have massive self doubts, and I can't do this well. I can't do that well. I mean, it's I think we all have them, and I think probably when you're kind of driven like me, it's like, oh man, I want to do this better. I want to do that better. Or I mean, the one thing that I realized in my life, though, is that everybody has gifts. And I tell young people this as well. Don't go around comparing yourself to other people. And just know, if that person is better at remembering history or is better at this or that, then you're better at something too. And it's, if that person's hard drive in their head is bigger than yours just works differently. I just think we all have gifts, and we need to work on those, and you need to get better and stretch yourself all the time and push yourself in directions you haven't been before, and try to do well. I mean, I think I am not intimidated by anyone. I'm in awe of people. I mean, over the years and think so-and-so's super smart, or this person's super kind, or, oh gosh, I wish I could be so kind all the time. I wish I wasn't distracted all the time. I wish but I know I'm good at some things, and I take pride in that, and I try to be better at other things that I'm not as good at.
How about regrets, honey?
Oh, regrets, I've had a few. But we're not going to talk about those. We're not going to talk about those.
No, we're not going to go down that road. It's funny.
Oh, I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one. I dropped out of college.
Oh, okay.
And so that's a regret. I dropped out of college, and it was stupid. It was like, I think I had less than a year to go. And
baloney. When I tell my friends who all dropped out of college, I say to them, no, you just decided to get your MA or your whatever at the School of Life.
Right.
Not everybody.
Well, I did do that, although I did give my son's commencement speech.
Well, I don't know. I think
and I said, sorry, honey, you had to do all the work, and we both got degrees today. But that's mine an honorary one.
I don't buy it. It's a funny story about you really quickly is that you were born in Idaho Falls, Idaho, somehow, and then you were raised in Salt Lake City. Roseanne Barr was in your class? Were you friends?
Yes. Yeah. She, we remember each other. And we reached out once over. We remember. I definitely remember her, but we weren't close friends. And she left, I think, in the junior year of high school. But I think no, I don't. I was raised by a single mother. My dad died just before my third birthday, and it's one of the reasons that my mom was actually raised in Salt Lake, and so moved us back there. And then I left in my mid-20s.
I was left
and moved to Boston.
Because I'll tell you why. Because as Barr took the comedic route, and you went the serious route, and I'm thinking, I wonder if Martha ever thinks, who needs this Michigas? Maybe I should have been a comedian.
No, it's interesting. It's she's definitely the most famous member of our high school class. And I joke that I spent my high school years thinking there's sinners out there somewhere, and I'm going to find them. And then I moved to Boston, so it was great. So
you are a comedian.
Yes, there you go.
I love it.
That's the extent of it.
Absolutely. The other story that floats around is that on your cell phone, your ringtone is Chameleonaires Riding Dirty. I mean,
it was for a time. My son did that to me.
You don't have that one anymore. Yeah, I think that's a pretty extraordinary thing. I want to do a send up. We've done the send up to you and this phenomenal book that you wrote and the story. But, you got to give it to National Geographic, because I've been covering a number of their scripted news series, and they are just doing a bang-up job.
I'm blown away by what they do.
Right?
I mean, I just can't believe, first of all, they are such professionals. I mean, they are amazing. And talk about brilliant women. Courtney Monroe, who's the CEO of Nat Geo Channel, and Carolyn Bernstein, who heads the scripted nonfiction. They are both just dynamos, and they're so impressive. The three of us have had some good times. Yes, we have. I love being with them. They're so impressive.
So before we leave, real quickly, what's next for you? Where are you going? What you doing? What's up?
I am just going to enjoy the rollout of the long road home, and then I will get back to my regular job and probably be, launched off aircraft carriers again. I'm bringing so many people together for these premieres, and we're doing one in D.C. on Wednesday, and lots of the soldiers will be here, and then I'm going to Fort Hood at the end of the week, and that will be so emotional, I know, for that community, because we'll have a screening there. And then after that in Los Angeles, and you have lots of friends coming in. In fact, one of the young fighter pilots from one of the carriers I was on once is going to fly in and give people some rides in his acrobatic airplane, not his F-18. He'll be off duty, but that's not his. I'm just looking forward to that, and I just want to enjoy that until I have to get back to work in the real world.
Okay, and my last question. So tell me, darling, what's George Stephanopoulos really like?
He's so smart. And when I say one of those things that if you, like, you just can't look and say, oh my gosh, she's so much smarter than me, because I really can say that, but I don't want to say that because he's just so smart and steady, and he's a real rock for ABC, and, such a good interviewer, and knows, he has politics in his DNA. I have foreign policy in mine. So it's been a wonderful mix. We both respect each other tremendously, and we both view things very differently. We can watch the same speech, and George can see things that I don't see, and hopefully I see a few things that he doesn't see.
I want to tell you one thing. When I knew I was going to talk to you, I called some friends. We have a lot of mutual friends. And I do that a lot before I'll do a story. I was blown away. Couldn't find one bad word about you, darling. So the screaming, the ranting, the yelling,
that's
the whatever.
so sweet.
So there you go. Thanks for all you do.
That's sweet. Thank you so much, Halli. This was a pleasure.
I love talking to you. Good luck with this. It's fabulous.
You too.
I've been speaking with Martha Raddatz. Tuesday, November 7th at 8 Central. The National Geographic Channel begins airing its 8-hour scripted series, The Long Road Home, a story of war and family. Visit channel.nationalgeographic.com. You are listening to Talkish, and I am Halli Casser-Jayne. My guests today are Martha Raddatz. Her book, The Long Road Home, now a scripted series on the National Geographic Channel. And Joseph Califano Jr., the author of The Triumph and Tragedy of Lyndon Johnson, The White House Years. Tune in to Talkish with Halli Casser-Jayne. Nearly 300 episodes available at hallicasserjayne.com. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Joseph Califano Jr. served as President Lyndon B. Johnson's top advisor for domestic affairs from 1965 to 1969, as well as Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. He is the man the New York Times called LBJ's Deputy President for Domestic Affairs. The author of more than a dozen books, Mr. Califano is out with a new edition of his personal memoir, a no-holds-barred account with an intimate portrait of a president of towering ambition at work, the triumph and tragedy of Lyndon Johnson, the White House years. In it, Califano illuminates President Johnson's enduring legacy, how his Great Society laws to this day touch every American and still dominate our political controversies, and what today's and future politicians and presidents can learn from his presidency. Let's talk. A president who made Washington work. Now, there is a novel idea. I'm beginning to think there are no leaders like there used to be. That being said, I know re-releasing your book, it's a re-release, is timed with the 50th anniversary of such groundbreaking legislation as President Johnson's 64 Civil Rights Act and 65 Voting Rights Act and the passing of Medicare and Medicaid. But did you think at all that it also might offer our leaders a timely reminder, if you will, of how our government can work?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned from Lyndon Johnson's presidency. It's a tendency of political pundits and even some scholars to say, well, it was unique. He knew the Congress better than anybody else, and he knew this and he knew that. But the reality is that the leadership he exercised and how he understood leadership and understood Washington can inform any presidency today. I mean, there are lots of examples, but, it's not simply schmoozing. People say Obama doesn't schmooze, but it's knowing the people that are up there, knowing the key people, knowing what they want or what they need or what they believe in and what they'll give in on. You really have to understand that. It's knowing and understanding the interests of the various power elites in this country, whether it's business or labor or religion or higher education, whether it's a minority group. It's all of those things are important, and anybody in politics that's really good at politics should be able to master that. And there are a whole lot of other things. I mean, Johnson was very opportunistic in the Cairo Greek sense of that word, in the best sense of that word. He knew he was willing to take advantage of a situation immediately to get something done. I mean, the worst week of his presidency was the week after Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, and the night of the assassination, he had me call the black leadership around the country, the civil rights leaders, and had me call King's father, who were invited to the White House. We offered to fly him up, but he wasn't up to it. And I said, the president wants me to tell you that he hopes God will bless you in this difficult time. And Martin Luther King's father said, please tell the president that I want God to bless him. He's going to need God's blessing more than any other person in this country.
Wow.
But then we had the meeting the next morning with the civil rights leaders. And then that afternoon, the president said to me, we're going to get something out of this tragedy. We've been trying for over 2 years to pass a fair housing bill. A terrific opposition to it. And basically so that anybody, whatever their color, could buy a house wherever they had the money and could afford it. And he said, we're going to get our fair housing bill. And he went after it. He went after it with the Speaker of the House and the minority leader, who was Gerald Ford, and he got it done.
Guy was relentless. I love it. Let me give my audience a little bit about you. You know, you are something else yourself in your own right. No small career of your own. Besides working with President Johnson, in January 1977, you became Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, and you put the department through the most complete reorganization of its 25-year history. I was reading this. I had no idea. Here's just some of what you did. Created the Healthcare Financing Administration to run Medicare and Medicaid. Tell me if I'm right about all this. Mounted major health promotion and disease prevention programs, including childhood immunization, which is pretty funny. Considering
we got
where we are today.
When I became secretary, only about 70% of kids were inoculated. We got it up over 90% within 2 years. Mrs. Carter, Rosalynn Carter, was also a big part of that. But we got these cities to pass ordinances that said you couldn't go to school unless you got inoculated and what have you. Go ahead, I don't want to.
No, I just love this. I mean, this is really pretty extraordinary. You issued the first Surgeon General's report on health promotion and disease prevention. I'm like looking through this long list. I'm trying to pick out just some. Worked with the Congress to maintain a financial integrity of the Social Security system. We could use you now. Issued the first regulations to provide equal athletic opportunity to women under Title IX.
Yeah, Title IX.
God bless you. Listen to you. I love you. I think I want you to become my new best friend. You're a guy who gets things done. Talk to me.
Well, we did, and we covered hospice care under Medicare, and also issued there was a regulation that said homosexuality was a mental disease, and when I found that out, I ordered it canceled in 1979 because it was being used to keep gays out of the country. Made no sense.
Craziness.
In any case,
yeah.
But I couldn't have done all of that if I hadn't spent 3.5 years with Lyndon Johnson.
So how did you get to Johnson? How did you guys hook up?
I was working in the Pentagon. I was Bob McNamara's top assistant, and I worked a lot with the White House staff, and I was offered a job to be one of his assistants, and then McNamara said, no, what you're doing here is more important unless he would take you as the national security advisor, or if he would create a domestic policy advisor and pull the domestic side together, the legislative programs and the domestic problems and economic policy. And so I said no. And then about 4 or 5 months later, the president called McNamara and said, I'm ready to create a domestic policy advisor, and he wanted me.
Wow.
I didn't know him, incidentally.
No, not at all.
I didn't know him. I'd shaken his hand once, that was all.
So when you first met him, first impression?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first met him, after that happened, I got a call from Jack Valenti or Bill Moyers, one of the aides, saying, the president's having a dinner tonight for a bunch of people that have advised him outside the government, economists and, some other experts in science and environment and what have you. He said, he wants you over here. So it was in the White House mess, and I went over there, and in the course of this dinner, I still haven't talked to him. He introduces me as on his staff, and on the way out, we're all going by and shaking hands with him. I shake hands with him, and he says, I want you at the ranch this weekend. And that's how it all started. And I went to the ranch, and it was an incredible experience. I mean, I write about it in the book, and he was in the pool. He said, "Come on in the pool." I went in the pool. It was where he could stand. He was 6'3". I was 5'10". I had to tread water. And he started hitting my shoulder, and he said, the transportation system in the country is a mess. We got to do something about it. We got to create a department and get a national policy. And then he said, we have to find a way to rebuild urban ghettos. We have to rebuild them. And then thirdly, he said, and I want to build for housing, for fair housing. So somebody, whether they're white, black, yellow, green, purple, can go live wherever they can afford to. And with every color, he hit me on the shoulder and pushed me down. I was, out of breath, to say the least. And he said, "Now, can you do this for your president?"
Yeah, I don't drown.
I said, yes. I had having no idea why.
Let me ask you.
Or how, I should say.
Or how.
It just was overwhelming.
I bet it was. Well, your impression of him in terms of personality, what's the key word if you walked into the room?
Well, he was a very powerful presence. When he walked into a room, he took over the room. But look, he was difficult. He was controversial. He could be charming, and he could be delightful and devious in the same 2 minutes. He was consumed. He was very focused. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew, as he famously said on one occasion, "What the hell is the presidency for?" When people urged him not to send the '64 Civil Rights Act up in an election year. But he knew what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to deal with poverty. He knew what he wanted to do with civil rights. He knew he wanted to do. He wanted to provide health care for the elderly, which he viewed as only a beginning. He knew we had to open up higher education to everybody. Because of his Higher Education Act, 60% of the kids in college are using his work-study program, the loan program, and the grant program. He knew something had to be done about the environment. He loved the land and the water and everything. And think about it. The first Clean Water Act, the first Clean Air Act, the first Solid Waste Disposal Act, the first Motor Vehicle Pollution Control Act. And he had a wonderful sense of humor and sort of a needle about things. When we were trying to get the motor vehicle pollution control law passed, we had terrific opposition from the auto industry. And Johnson at one point said to me, he said, if we could make those auto executives in Detroit and their wives drive around Detroit in the summer with no air conditioning in their cars, we damn well get this. They damn well solve this problem.
So he was creative.
Well, sure. And he used to say, when we get resistance on the poverty program from the bankers in the Northeast, he'd say, if we had a law that said that these Wall Street guys couldn't get on the train, if we had the Wall Street guys had to drive to and from work, and they had to drive through Harlem, they'd understand what we're trying to do about poverty. Instead, they just get on a train and drink 3 martinis before they get home. So he had a sense of that.
Yeah, he did. And here's the other thing. He wasn't afraid of compromise, was he?
No. He took it. When he had to do it, he did it. And sometimes it was good. Sometimes it created problems. But to get Medicare passed, we had to compromise. We did not want to give hospitals cost-plus reimbursement, but we couldn't get it out of the Senate Finance Committee unless we did. And he said, give it to him. Let's get this bill passed. He understood that. When we proposed fair housing, there was a big dust-up about Mrs. Murphy's boarding house. The woman, the poor old lady who was renting a room out. And she would have to take some big black guy that she was scared of in her house. And we dealt with that. We made it for multi-dwellings, and I mean, he knew how to do that, and he was willing to do that. And he used compromise. I mean, but with compromise, he was moving towards his goal. He wasn't giving up what he was trying to get done. He kept taking steps forward.
I had this thought about him. Tell me what you think about this. He was the big Texan with the big ears. He had a big love with Lady Bird, which was phenomenal to watch the two of them. Whether they were in love or not, they just played it so wonderfully. So who cares? I mean, it was wonderful to watch. And he was a man of big, bold ideas. But was he also a micromanager?
Well, he wasn't a micromanager in the sense that on the big pieces of legislation, after he would get the main point, and then he would let me put a lot of flesh on it. and I check on things that he wanted to, where I wanted to make sure he was aboard. I thought we might be veering a little bit off from what he wanted. But he didn't get down to the nuts and bolts of legislation. But in terms of, do we have the vote? Have you talked to enough committee members to know we can get this bill out of committee? And that kind of thing, very much so. And secondly, in fact, there's a picture in the book of a meeting of the House and Senate leadership, and Barry O'Brien and I are at one end of the table, and there's a big board behind us of bills, when introduced, when in committee, when out of committee, when on the floor, when passed the House, when passed the Senate, when back, when enacted. But and he had and in that sense, and then when he wanted to get something done, he knew things so well. For example, when the '64 Act required desegregation of the schools, and that he was determined that we get these schools desegregated, and they produced plans for that. And he had me he had me giving him a weekly report on the schools. He had, desegregated, not what stage is it in, are there negotiations, and he wanted to make sure every school in Texas was desegregated, and he got involved personally in that.
So he's a detail kind of guy.
He knew that passing a law was the first step, and you had to execute the law. You really had to get into it. And on the Voting Rights Act, as we were driving back from the Congress the day he signed the Voting Rights Act, he said, I want lawsuits filed by the Justice Department next week to void as unconstitutional the poll taxes and literacy tests and other things. And then he said, I want you to get federal examiners, which the law authorized, in these deep southern states, so we start getting people registered to vote, get Negroes registered to vote. And I said, we really don't have examiners. We just passed this law. He said, we have federal employees in every state, don't we? I said, yes. He said, well, you make some of the examiners. And he said, I want most of the counties covered next week. I mean, that kind of stuff.
Right. But
he knew that you had to do that.
Right.
Most presidents don't fully appreciate. They have to drive. Giving an order doesn't mean the order will be carried out.
So fascinating. The Great Society. He coined that phrase. Is that true?
He coined that phrase before I was associated with him. He coined that phrase at the University of Michigan in May of 1964 in the speech he gave there. He said, it's not how much wealth we accumulate, but how we use it. And it's quite a moving speech.
Yeah, everybody should read that speech. I want to talk to you about Martin Luther King's civil rights in the context of the film Selma. All right?
Okay.
I just saw it, and I want to share with you my perspective on it. I tell you what, I wasn't old enough to be, totally aware what was going on. It was I was still a little bit too young, but I, over the years, learned my thing. The portrayal in Selma by its director, Ava DuVernay, of the man who did pass the Civil Rights and Voting Act, the President Johnson that you worked for, in the movie, it's bizarre. And I think it's disgusting, to tell you the truth, because in my mind, when I watched it, she was so vilifying him, and I thought to myself, I was getting angry. It was activism, bad activism. And I was thinking, why is she doing this? Taking an already skeptical black audience and making them more skeptical. And I was infuriated. And I know you wrote about it. I want you to tell my audience what your thoughts were.
Well, I can understand it. When I saw that film, it's false. First of all, about Lyndon Johnson, the film is false. It's not a matter of theatrical license. It is totally false. The first meeting he has with King is portrayed as a very contentious meeting in December of '64. That meeting actually was a very warm meeting and a respectful meeting. Andrew Young was there and said that. Then on January 15th, and then she portrays him as not really wanting the Voting Rights Act. On January 15th, 1965, he calls King, and this is a telephone conversation. This is not my opinion. This conversation was taped. It's on tape. You can go to the LBJ library and listen to it. You can listen to it on your computer or on your phone. They talk about appointing Negroes to positions in the government. Negro was the term in those days. And then he tells King, we're going to help them with education. We're going to help your people with health care. But the most important thing, doctor, he's the King, called King doctor, is the vote. If they get the vote, that'll solve 70% of their problems. And he tells them he's going with a Voting Rights Act. And he said, you can make a contribution, doctor, that'll help. Find the worst place in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, or South Carolina, and where a Negro has to recite the Constitution and to register and a white person doesn't. And you go down there, you get the other leaders, civil rights leaders down there, you get it on the radio, you get it on television, you get it in the pulpits, and you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And eventually a guy that does nothing but drive a tractor will say, it isn't fair. It isn't fair.
Right.
And that'll help me push through what I intend to shove through Congress up here. The Selma March, there was one march that was aborted, and then there was a march in which there was a lot of violence, and John Lewis had his head banged in, and the white minister from Boston was killed. And Johnson summons Wallace to the White House. Wallace was the Alabama governor. Says, you have to let these people vote. And Wallace says, I don't have anything to do with the voting. And Johnson says, don't BS me, George. I know you do. And then he says, and you got to take care of the marches. And Wallace says, I can't. Johnson says, if you can't, I will. He federalized the Alabama National Guard, which made them put them in the Army. And we had them protect the marches on the march that goes from Selma all the way to Montgomery, the capital. Now, that's the fact. That's not the portrayal. And Johnson never tried to demean King. And the movie has this indication. One, there's a scene in which the FBI director stands in front of the President of the United States and says, we can take care of this guy permanently or temporarily. I mean, permanently. Killing him. That's what he's talking about. Unbelievable that any president, and certainly not Lyndon Johnson, would sit there, or that a director would say that. And secondly, the indication that Johnson sent the tapes of King having sexual relations with women in a hotel to King's wife.
Right.
That's simply not true. Those tapings were done by Robert Kennedy, and we know from the New York Times and others that really investigated this after this came out, those tapes were sent to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1963 when Johnson was still vice president. It just, to me, the story was dramatic enough. A white Southern president partnering with a civil rights leader to get a law passed that neither of them could have gotten done alone. I mean, that's a dramatic story. And number two, your point, the real tragedy is that kids who see this movie and adults, that's where they get history. They don't read the way I used to read when I was a kid, or the way you read.
Right, exactly. Right.
That's where they find their history. And this history is false history.
Yeah.
And I believe it contributes to racial tension.
Well, that's why I use the word activist. That's I thought she was being militant in this film, and I was frankly surprised that Oprah Winfrey allowed it. But that's another conversation. I got to move on because we've got no time, and I got a lot to talk to you about. We've got to get to the Vietnam War only in this respect, because so much cynicism, so much despair. How did that war and the dissent get so out of hand? And I only have a minute for that. So,
okay, it's a tragedy, and that's the tragedy. The book is The Triumph and Tragedy of Lyndon Johnson, and the war is the tragedy. It was an awful, frightful war. It certainly clouded his presidency. It clouded all these enormous domestic achievements, lasting achievements, and it'll always, to some extent, cloud his presidency. But I think now what we're seeing is an evaluation, and people begin to recognize, as the Washington Post said a few months ago, we wouldn't know what to do in this world if he hadn't passed those laws. It wouldn't be our world.
Right.
So,
all right. Here's another one I want to talk to you about. Big government. Johnson was the king of big government in a good way. Now big government is the boogeyman. What's the deal?
Well, I mean, I think he put the sum of government on the scale of the vulnerable. His view was, in the large, dealing with poverty in the broadest sense. You had to get educated, you had to be healthy. Basically, the economy was the most important thing. And he spent more time on the economy than anything else. If the economy is really doing well, 75% of the people in this country are in good shape. Then the rest of the people, some of them need a hand up. They need what, most of us got from our mothers and fathers. They need good health. They need nutrition. They need education. They need all of that. We ought to be giving these people the training, the education, so they have the hand up. And there are some people that simply need help, and they're the old and the disabled. That's Medicare, that's Social Security, disability, and we ought to provide for them so that they can live with some dignity in their lives. And that was it. It was that was the strategy. In a sense, it was that simple. he was very conscious of government overstepping. I mean, he said, when we'd have these disturbances around the country, which we had plenty in the 60s, he'd say, local law enforcement's got to deal with them. I don't want, we're not going to send troops in. This is a local problem. We've got to make them do it locally because they will deal with it. We can't have them rely on us. And he never would have had, for example, a Department of Education, nor would I when I was Secretary of Education and Welfare. I thought it was a mistake. And we're seeing now how the federal government is getting too deeply
intrusive.
education.
But it seems to me that the difference between men like him and what we've got going on now is a moral compass. Politics have usurped morality. No? Yes?
Well, he had a moral compass. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But also money has become such a big factor today.
Right.
I mean, you look at what's going on right now in America, and all the candidates are running around
trying to make money,
trying to get money.
Right. We pledge our allegiance not to the flag, but to Citizens United these days. It's really rather sad. A couple of other things that he did that most people probably don't associate with him: National Endowment for the Arts, Freedom of Information.
Think about the National Endowment.
Public broadcasting. Yeah, right. I mean, wow, right?
Well, incredible. I mean, over the years, that National Endowment has started or funded and helped 1,800 theater companies, over 750 symphony orchestras and chamber groups, over 400 dance companies, 140 opera companies. I mean, just incredible. The Freedom of Information Act, which gives reporters the opportunity to get in there and get documents that people in government would rather they not have. And I make one other point as we close this. Johnson was president when America was morphing. The corner grocers and the local pharmacists and the local banks and the small retailers were morphing into the supermarkets, the national drug chains, the banks, national banks, and the national retailers. And there were a host of consumer bills that he proposed and got enacted. He used to say the housewife is at a terrible disadvantage when she walks into a supermarket looking at packages that are designed very cleverly, or the veteran when he's trying to buy a car or a house can't really, and has to borrow money, is no match for the lawyers that are drafting these papers. And so, truth in packaging, truth in lending, wholesome meat and poultry and fish, the National Product Safety Commission, all of that, highway safety, auto safety, the National Transportation Safety Board, all of that came out of those years, and very important for the protection of our people.
Bottom line, all that good work that he did for the disenfranchised, Vietnam defeated him, and he elected not to run for the second term and died only 4 years after leaving the White House. Were you there the day he turned over the keys? And share with us how he reconciled this presidency in light of the ultimate defeat. I guess my bottom line question is really, did he die a happy or at best
he died,
a man satisfied?
He left the White House. He decided not to run because he thought he had become very divisive on the war and on race. And he, and also Lady Bird was worried about his health. Thank God he left before King was assassinated, because it enabled him to deal with all those issues with people knowing he was not running for office. He left. He was, I think, depressed when he was in Texas. He felt he would never get recognition for what he'd done for the country. I think he had, who knows, I think he had all kinds of second thoughts about the war. Though every advisor he had, except George Ball, the Undersecretary of State, and Clark Clifford, who was a private attorney, every other advisor wanted to do even more war than he did. But he didn't leave happy. And, the last thing he did before he died, the last event, was the release of the Civil Rights Papers a couple of weeks before. And as he went up 2 steps to take the microphone, he had to pop a nitroglycerin pill for the pain in his heart. He got up and he said, he never liked the word never. And his job and the job of this country was to make never now for people that needed help. And that was it.
I've been speaking with Joseph Califano, Jr., author of an extremely important and eminently readable book, The Triumph and Tragedy of Lyndon Johnson, The White House Years, by way of Touchstone, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. For more information, visit simonandschuster.com.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of RESEC LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern. Visit HalliCasserJayne.com.